Hello, everyone. This is Karmel, day 2 at Consensus Miami. I am here with Charles and Ben from the Midnight team, and we're going to talk about Midnight Passport. I do product at the foundation. I'm going to pass it to Charles.
Hi, I'm Charles Hoskinson, the CEO of Input Output, and I do a few things for Midnight.
A lot of things.
Hi, I'm Ben Beckmann. I'm the Chief Technical Advisor at the Midnight Foundation. Work with Karmel and Charles to bring new things to life.
Amazing. Before we kick off the conversation about what Midnight Passport is and what initiated this concept and the work that we're doing, I want to start with one statistic that I thought was incredible. We have about 2.3 million Bitcoins that are permanently lost, which is 11 to 18% of the total supply, due to forgotten keys and lost devices. That's a significant number. Tell us what we're going to do to solve that.
So this is a persistent problem in the cryptocurrency space. Normally, when you build a product, you want to make it so that the people who use the product have to know how the product works to use it.
Correct.
Like, we don't have to know how light works to use a light switch. We don't have to know how electricity works to use a light switch. We don't have to know how the internet works to use the internet. But crypto seems to be this one product category where there's an incredibly onerous demand on the user to use a cryptocurrency. So they have to understand how a wallet works and how to back up their keys, and they have to actually go to an exchange and buy stuff and go through KYC and all this other stuff. You have, I think maybe you model it 14 steps, 15 steps, or just a ridiculous amount of friction, and it's real time too, in some cases days to weeks, to be able to onboard into the ecosystem. And then even after you've done all of that, it's really easy to make a mistake. And when you make a mistake, you lose all your money.
Correct.
Yeah. And so I've been in the industry for 15 years, and every survey that I've seen over the past probably 10, 11 years, when they ask what's the number one concern a user has about using cryptocurrency, it's safety. They say it again and again. I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to lose my money. I'm going to do something bad is going to happen. And I said, well, do I have that fear? And I say, actually, I do. Whenever I send something with Dan or somebody else, I call somebody on the phone. I say, hey, did you get it? I sent the test transaction. Okay, now I'm going to send you the full transaction. I say, if I build these things for a living, I shouldn't have this issue. So what we want to do at Midnight is kind of reset and rebuild the entire experience of how people onboard, not just for Midnight, but for the industry as a whole, and make the safest way to use Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, or Midnight to be on the Midnight network. And we have this wonderful idea called Midnight Passport, and I guess that's what we're talking about today.
That is what we're talking about today. We do have a top-of-the-funnel problem in the blockchain ecosystem, and This is what we're trying to tackle and solve for. Users are not going to tolerate what we have, generally speaking, in the ecosystem, not Midnight. And that's not acceptable, because we're used to seamless user experience, we're used to ease of use, immediate gratification, etc. And if we wait 7, 15, 14 steps and 10, 30, 15 minutes for you to actually see something happen, you may lose interest, you may lose context and abandon the experience itself. And that's not okay. And that's not what we want our users to do. I don't know if you want to add anything, Ben.
I'd play into that. Some of these interactions, I forget why I'm there.
Yeah.
And it's somewhat reasonable if I want to go back and I really want to be engaged in this. But most of my other activities that I do and other elements of my life are much simpler, right? I load the app on my phone, click a few buttons, and off I go.
Right.
That type of experience is what Web3 needs.
Right.
And then that type of experience also has guardrails around it, so that if I goof up or I lose my phone, drop it into a pool or down a drain, I can recover. I can become the same Ben I was yesterday, today, even after that particular event, and I can go gain access back to the assets that I have or the resources that are.
That is correct. There are 2 pain points, Charles, that you mentioned. One is the adoption curve and actually getting to the experience. And the second one is this fear of, am I doing this transaction correctly? Mm-hmm. Am I actually sending this to the right person? Did they receive it? And what happened? And we don't have that in Web 2. I can Zelle someone, I can Venmo someone. I'm not in the back of my mind thinking, did they actually get it? What happened? Because it's very straightforward. I have a name, I follow that, and I go from there. What are your thoughts on our experience solving for this?
Yeah, so we've had concepts in the industry for a while, like chain abstraction and account abstraction, and they came from the Ethereum ecosystem, and they've been perfected by ecosystems like Near, and they work really well in certain use cases and places, but the missing ingredient is you have to pair abstraction with privacy. You can't separate the two, because when you have abstraction, you have some concept of delegation. You have some concept of there's somebody I'm going to invite into this structure, and they're going to make it simpler for me, or they're going to do something on my behalf. So we think a lot about agents these days. You got OpenClaw, and the lobsters are taking over the world. Okay, well, I want to delegate to this lobster to do tasks on my behalf. Well, hang on a second here. Like, how much does that thing actually know about me? And the more useful it becomes, the more it knows about me, and thus the more harm it can do if an untrusted third party takes it over or uses that data maliciously. Well, account and chain abstraction is very much the same way. So you think, okay, first, what did we learn from Ledger and Trezor? Is that users really shouldn't have their own private keys. They shouldn't be managing that. So people spent literally billions of dollars over the last 10 years, 15 years, building specialized devices that everybody in this industry now owns to manage keys for them, because it's a safe environment and it's a low threat vector. Well, it turns out that there are actually better trust execution environments that are in your phone already, because apparently Apple has this problem and Google has this problem, and they're very big, well-financed companies, and so they pushed for trust execution environments to exist. And there's a revolution right now in confidential compute in general because of AI. When you look at AI workloads, nobody wants to go and spend $5 million in getting on-prem servers and buying things. They want to outsource it, but it's really difficult to outsource all your business logic, all your proprietary business data to an untrusted third party. So the compromise is, why don't we build trust execution environments in the GPUs to do this stuff? So we're seeing a renaissance right now in highly specialized hardware where you have very capable ledger-like devices that can do many operations above and beyond cryptography. Well, these are being exposed now to the developer, which means every phone has a ledger in it. Every phone has a Trezor in it. So instead of ignoring that, what we've done is said, why don't we take advantage of that? And then when you pair it with privacy, you can then build a really good recovery system at the same time. So when somebody onboards, they just scan a QR code or something like it, and within 60 seconds, they get an account set up. And at the same time, they set up the recovery system. So to your point, if you lose your phone, you lose your laptop, you lose your device, it's very easy for you to come back, but no one else can. But then once you have that, then you can take it a step further and say, well, why am I just creating a wallet? There's all these things that are derivable keychains. They can be for identities, multiple wallets and multiple chains. They can be special access things for websites like passcodes and other things like that. And if you build a programmable sandbox, you've created a passport that allows you to have access to a very broad spectrum of use cases. Then from the user perspective, they just do one thing, and that thing works with everything. That's what we learned from cell phones is, we just want a standard experience. Everything is one click. I just put my fingerprint or scan my face or put a PIN code in, and it just works. You can't go against that type of user experience for everybody. And it turns out you could build it in a way that is remarkably secure, much more so than average wallets. And as a final point, then you can take all the innovations from the rest of the cryptocurrency space, like the Ethereum name service or all the abstraction stuff, or the open wallet standards for agents, and you can put it into that stack, and you can have one surface for everything. So you have like an email for money. It's Charles at midnight or something, and we don't have to care about the addresses, and I know you got it because I verified that. Or when you delegate to an agent, your agent actually has the same wallet infrastructure that the individual person does, so they're first-class citizens. This only works when you have privacy, because you trust people too much if it's a transparent system. You don't want the person you've delegated to or outsourced to know your entire financial history and know what you're buying or any of these other things. You want them to facilitate a service or do something for you. It's the same with the off-chain data component. It's a huge component of all these schemes. You have all this non-derivable data from the use of the system, so you can't restore it from a keyword. Well, where does that go? We say, they'll just store it locally. So when I lose my phone, I lose my entire history. Okay, we'll put it in the cloud so Microsoft can see it, or Google can see it, or Apple can see it. Well, if you have a derivable keychain, you can encrypt locally, and then you can use any file service like Filecoin if you want it decentralized, or Google or Microsoft with OneDrive, and it just works and it just automatically syncs. So you never really lose your history. It's always there, and the people who hold it, you don't trust them. because you have privacy before it goes to them. That's kind of the Midnight philosophy.
There's a stat that was 35% of MetaMask users do not back up their seed phrase. So I can imagine the madness of losing
That's my soul.
losing that information.
Yeah.
So we have to solve for human error, which is natural and normal. We are going to make these mistakes. It's a lot. There's a lot of overhead when you're thinking about different experiences and you're going through them, and that's that. If we walk through the funnel for the user as their journey, we have awareness, sign up, experience, engagement. But the biggest drop off comes from gas and paying for that transaction and moving forward from that. And I know we have multiple solutions for it. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. Ben, do you want to talk about?
Sure. So we have a very interesting tokenomics model that separates the token, the crypto token, the one that carries the value, from the actual fuel. And that crypto token allows you to generate the fuel token, which we refer to as dust, from now until eternity. You get to delegate where it goes. You get to produce it. That separation, though, also allows for other things to happen. It allows for somebody to pay your gas fee for you, or it allows you to use a service potentially provided by a validator that you're a member of to pay your gas fee for you and allow you to interact without even knowing you're using crypto at all. You could build a proof literally on your phone that is private, keeps private information, advances the state of the system, but that phone doesn't actually even have to own or hold any crypto. And that type of experience allows us to have broad reach, where what I'd refer to as Web 2 or more traditional applications are all now very easily integratable with a system like Midnight, and we can provide privacy to those systems where we flip who is in possession of the data, right? The usual method is the provider of the service is in possession of your data, which is nice of you to give it to them.
Right.
But that's the arrangement. And by being able to flip it the other way, now me, the actual user of the system who's producing the data, has control over it.
Right.
And I can determine whether or not I want to share it or I want to keep it.
Right.
Yeah, and the magic of these types of systems, there's kind of like three properties that I just absolutely love. So the first property is, with any ZK system, you're starting to move the burdens of proof to the person saying it instead of the network as a whole. And what that means is that people eat what they kill. The resources of a user are primarily provided by the user themselves. So when you look at like infinitely scalable protocols like BitTorrent, that's always been the case. You know, you're downloading a movie. If more people download it, you actually get it faster.
Right.
And that's paradoxical, because normally in a service, if more people consume the service, there's less resources, right? So when you have a ZK system and I do the computation on my side, or there's some trusted party or somebody else that I've done the computation with, then the network is only validating. It's not doing the heavy lifting of these things. So you can very organically scale to millions or billions of users. And also those users don't necessarily have to follow all the same rules or be from your system. So interoperability goes way up too. So you can have an Ethereum user or a Solana user, and they can prove enough to be able to use the network, but they don't have to use Midnight directly. So that dimension's already pretty awesome. Second, with dual tokenomics, what's really exciting about it is this idea of the Web 2 business model. We don't have that in Web 3. If I go to Google, I don't have to put a token to Google and like spend a transaction fee to Google search. So if a consumer has been pre-trained, 5 billion consumers with freemium models where they use Facebook for free and Google for free and ChatGPT for free, it's really hard to get them to go and buy a token and pay. So when you have a dual tokenomics model and you have a fuel token separated from the holder value, the advantage of that capacity unit is it can be delegated. So the provider of the service can delegate that to the users of their application, and then the users can use that for free. So you have a much more natural growth curve, and you can have much more diverse business models that come into play. And then an extension of that concept is also you can pay in any instrument that you want. So you can pay in stable coins, or you can pay in Bitcoin, and you allow very natural organic marketplaces to form. So we call that a capacity exchange. And that's something that's very unique to Midnight. We've been trying to push front and center is figuring out, like, how do you build a marketplace? Because the last point is the cooperative economics. I got very bothered being in the industry for so long, and everybody's so adversarial. And I ask, like, why is everybody so adversarial? Well, the problem is we have sum-zero tokenomics. So if my token wins, your token loses.
Right.
And so no matter if we technologically agree with each other and philosophically agree with each other, if it's your pocketbook and my pocketbook, we're probably going to end up in conflict with each other. So if you have cooperative economics, what's nice about it is you've aligned every holder of the system to try to create growth and adoption of the system from everybody. Just the other day, I saw the CEO of Cosmos. And I said, we got to get IBC uplink to Midnight. Like, we got to figure this out. Well, do you guys support Atom? We absolutely do, because of the capacity exchange.
Right.
See, so it's good for them, and it feels like an extension of their ecosystem. And every time we get a relationship like that, we try to bring somebody in. Like we just brought Filecoin, for example. That brings use, utility, and demand for Dust inside the system, and they get to pay the underlying token. So cooperative tokenomics is one of the best parts, I think, about the Midnight ecosystem, the most fun part. It means it's very natural and easy for us to all do partners. Well, what wraps up with the Midnight Passport is the universality of this, because that's an extension of cooperation. When you have this single thing that's on a TEE in your phone and it's really easy to use, and you can derive anything through multi-chain signatures and other artifacts, it's very easy for people to spend into and interact with other chains, like Bitcoin for Bitcoin DeFi or XRP or Ethereum, other things like that. So what you're telling the consumer is just download one thing and it works with everything. And it's going to increase your security and privacy for your Bitcoin use, or your security and privacy for your Ethereum use. And that universality is for any use case. So once they're in from one application, they're in for all applications. So maybe they came in through a video game, or maybe they came in through a voting system or a supply chain system or a health record system like Nexifuse or something like that. Well, now they have a passport for all of the DeFi, not just for us, but the entire cryptocurrency space, which is a really cool aggregator for everybody, and they're in control of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I do like the concept of having multiple profiles within your passport. That way you can select and choose what you want to share with the different applications, and you're able to control that information, whereas that's not available in every application that you're using right now, which makes the experience much, much, much easier. Can we talk a little bit about how this will work cross-chain? How are the users going to bring their assets onto Midnight from other networks? How does that work together?
So you don't necessarily need to bring assets into Midnight for this to work. There's advantages to doing that, because then you can start doing privacy. And we think actually the biggest users to move assets into Midnight will be institutional and custodians, because their customers are like, hey, we don't really feel comfortable with people tracking your addresses and figure out when we're withdrawing and depositing our money. I mean, you don't get to do that with Chase.
No.
Nobody stands outside the door when I withdraw money. They're like, hey, give us, tell us how much Charles put in and out. So custodians are getting pretty pissed off that they don't have a native privacy solution to kind of protect their customers' accounts. So the thing is that there's all kinds of emerging technologies like multi-chain signatures where you could use a delegated authority or download light infrastructure and do it yourself to basically spend into and receive funds on those networks. So the example I like to give is the loop. So we have something called Bitcoin DeFi that we're building for Cardano. And how it's going to work is that you have taproot addresses and BitVM, and you can do these lovely zero-knowledge proofs on Bitcoin to prove properties of other systems. So you lock your Bitcoin on Bitcoin, and then you lend it to a stablecoin somewhere else, let's say Cardano. And then after it's lent to that stablecoin, you go put it to some yield-bearing DeFi, let's say RealFi. Okay, so you start generating a yield, and then you want to convert the yield into Bitcoin so that you can get it paid back into the Bitcoin network. So from the Bitcoin user's perspective, they just pushed a big red button called Make Money, and then suddenly they just start getting yield on their Bitcoin. They didn't see all these transactions happening somewhere else. Well, if you add Midnight into the mix, what it does is access the coordinating function. So you can route it through and have a privacy layer in that system, and so nobody knows your Bitcoin is doing that type of thing. You see, that's the value add. So now you talk three networks,
right?
Midnight, Bitcoin, and Cardano working together, and the usage of Midnight requires a transaction fee. Well, that's Dust. How did you pay for it with your Bitcoin? Through the capacity exchange. So from the Bitcoin user's perspective, they haven't left the network. They haven't adopted another token. They don't know how all these different steps are happening. There's a coordinating function. And the people coordinating that function, they don't actually know who they're doing it for, because there's a privacy layer inside the system. So that solver is taking care of all of that. So that's kind of like multi-chain working. And it's not a hypothetical. I'm going to take 50 of my own Bitcoin I'm going to put it into the system in the next few months as we turn on all the capabilities just to test the circuit and see the latency of it, the yield of it, all these other things. But that's like real life DeFi, because at the end of the day, we have to build an interface that it's phone native. It's just click the button. It just works. And under the hood, there's all these things that we've engineered it in that protect your safety and privacy and security. And you know exactly where and when you're trusting people and how you're trusting them and how much information they're getting.
Right.
The goal of Midnight is reduce the trust and improve the safety, and then also minimize the amount of information required to be able to go through this entire flow. So they just know they're processing something. They don't know for which account. We don't know for who. That means they can't discriminate and say, well, I don't like that person, or that person's my competitor, or I don't philosophically agree with that company. So no, we're going to shut those guys out.
Yeah.
And what's cool is that there's been so many open standards created for this, like the intent standards through the OIF. There's a lot of great ERCs for this, and there's whole chains that facilitate multi-chain signatures, like Near, for example. So we've had the luxury of being able to watch that market develop and become quite mature. It just hasn't been paired with privacy yet, and also hasn't been paired with agentic standards yet, because we think a lot of this facilitation is going to be done with AI agents at the end of the day, that you basically deploy a program you own, and they are kind of like your agent. They represent your interest and make sure that no one messes with it.
Why do you think this hasn't been solved before? Crypto has been here for a while. Blockchain has been here for a while. And that fragmentation and that really horrible user experience has existed. Why hasn't it been addressed?
Well, a lot of the underlying technology only recently came into market. When you look at like Roth 16, that was 2016, yeah? And that was the very first entry point for a very simplistic proof system. So being able to have like programmable private smart contracts, we're really, us and Aleo are some of the first in the market for that. And it's a very new cutting edge thing. So there's some frontier technology. Second, it takes time for standards to emerge. And typically standards come out of fragmentation of frustration. Yeah. So why does Ethereum focus so much on account abstraction, and they're starting to focus on intents? Because they couldn't scale in the early days, and as a result, all these layer 2s popped up. So now they have dozens and dozens and dozens of layer 2s, which means assets are all over the damn place, and users are all over the place. And if the user has to care what chain they're on and where there's at and link all this stuff together, what are they going to do? They're going to mess it up.
Yeah.
At some point, they're going to mess it up, and then they're going to lose all their money, or some bad result's going to happen. And so what people are doing retroactively is saying, we need to solve this problem. The challenge is it's really hard to retrofit a running structure. So Ethereum was never built to be a native account abstraction in a native chain abstraction based system. Near had the luxury of being able to integrate those types of things. And with Midnight, we have the luxury of integrating that, and at the same time integrating privacy at the core of that type of system. So we actually have some hindsight advantage in this type of thing. The second thing is the tokenomics get in the way. If you don't have a dual token model, at the end of the day, they're always like, well, how can I increase the amount of people buying my packs?
Right.
It's got to be good for Ether. It's got to be good for this. We don't care what currency you pay in. We don't care what ecosystem you come from. So when you have that mentality, it's a lot easier to work with people, because you start feeling like a natural extension of their ecosystem. And so you can go to Solana people and they say, oh, that's a Solana application. Or go to Ethereum people, oh, that's Ethereum. And they don't differentiate Midnight and say it's something alien and different. It's like a value add layer. This is what ChatGPT did so incredibly well. You have to study the grades. They went from nothing to 800 million users in just a few years, which is, nobody does that. It's just, it's unprecedented. It's one of the fastest growing apps in human history. And one of the big reasons they did that is because of the embeddability in the API layer, where they added AI to everybody's application and they let it be your AI. It wasn't ChatGPT's AI. There was no powered by ChatGPT or anything like that. You just basically embed it. And so I got a meditation app. It's Muse, and I use it every day. And it's got now an AI system inside of it. It's powered by ChatGPT, but they don't have to say that. And it's a great thing, and it analyzes your brain waves. So that's why you get 800 million users. So this Midnight under the hood concept, I think, is going to work really well, because every 3 to 6 months we can add new capabilities. We can add MPC, and we can add more stuff with trusted execution and different types of zero knowledge capabilities. And then suddenly, as a user who's embedded that, then suddenly your app just gets that for free, and you don't have to worry about these really complicated things. I think that's the missing ingredient to abstraction, is an economic abstraction model where once you embed, you're along for the ride and you just get more value organically without having to pay for it.
Right. Ben, do you want to talk a little bit about night mode and how that fits into the play of Passport?
Sure. So, you could cutely say that once you get your passport, in a way, you're a citizen of Midnight, but that implies that you're kind of coming on board with Midnight, you're committing to it. And as Charles mentioned, that's not the play we're in. We're more in the communal, integrative, cooperative type of system. And so with your passport, if you commit some assets to it, you can have a representation that's on Midnight that you can manipulate privately. You can manipulate it, and you can actually use it such that you could interact with existing properties on existing chains without you, the user, needing to understand all of the idiosyncrasies of this.
Correct.
One way to classify that is to kind of call it dark mode, right? So now you've used something like a Uniswap where you're used to using that on Ethereum. There's no reason you can't make those interactions triggered from Midnight, still on your behalf with your certification that this is an application and a transaction that you would like to do, but hide who is doing the particular activity. So you can't have things like people picking who they want to participate and who they don't.
Right.
One analogy that this lines up with in the more traditional internet space is just adding the S to HTTP. The protocol came along, it worked, you needed to add security, somebody figured out how to put that layer in, and all the user sees is a little check. And the site's fine, or you see the big warning of, go away.
Right.
And so that type of interaction, just simply giving you the option with existing properties that you've been working with for many years to enable the dark mode, is something that we think that Midnight will be able to add, and it'll improve innovation. You'll still be able to make your new fancy DEX or supply chain app or whatever it may be, but you give optionality to the user to choose whether or not they want to reveal the metadata associated with those transactions or be one step removed.
Right. It's not just yet another smart onboarding experience that we're working towards. It's actually solving for, you've been onboarded, we've made it much, much easier for you. You don't have to worry and have anxiety of holding your keys and or your your seed phrase, etc. But also there's an immediate value add where you can connect to different networks and different blockchains and move your assets around and using your alias to be able to send payments or submit them without having the fear of, did I send it to the right person? Can I test 10 different transactions on this bridge to make sure I've bridged it to the right amount, etc. That way, and the slippage and worrying about all the different elements that come into play. So there's intention behind every step that we're doing as we build Midnight Passport to make sure that it is an experience that's cohesive and not solving for bits and pieces of onboarding for users. I want to speak a little bit about agents. What are we thinking about agents?
Yeah, this is probably the most exciting part of cryptocurrency because at the end of the day, you have to delegate something somewhere. You can do it all yourself, but it's horrendously difficult and time-consuming. And the probability of making a mistake is quite high because you're assuming you're going to do everything perfectly, up to and including picking the right software. There's no backdoors in it. There's no problems or bugs or zero-day exploits or things like that. So when you look at agents, what agents do is they are a cognitive helper to help you navigate the cryptocurrency space. Everything from how do I fulfill your intention to how do I vet that the things that you're interacting with are legitimate and real? Do you really have time to go read a bunch of documentation or analyze the governance structure or something or whatever? Not really, especially if it's a small potatoes or you're not a domain expert, you can't really understand the nuances of each thing. But an agent can have superhuman intelligence to be able to do this. And the only thing it cares about, if it's programmed the right way, is you.
Yep.
And the only person it represents is you if it's programmed the right way. So when people start getting this, our thesis is that over the next 5 or 10 years, you're going to see probably more cryptocurrency transactions being enabled by agents than by humans. And you see that with like the X.402 Foundation, which I think we're going to join here in a bit. Coinbase and Google got together. They created this great standard for agentic payment. There's a companion standard for agent-born wallets called the Open Wallet Standard. And there's some amazing work that's been done there. We're going to get Cardano Midnight integrated into that soon. But these are case studies in how you can kind of dream out an agentic commercial stack and this concept of agents having their own wallets and doing things for you. So a companion product to Midnight Passport is Midnight City. And what's cool there is it's this beautiful petri dish where we're figuring out how to build an agentic civilization. So it starts, people get their own agents and they do cute, fun things. And the joke that we have on the team is we say, we know we've gotten it right when you wake up and your agent suddenly got married and another agent. And then you wake up the next day, they've gotten divorced. And wake up the next day, your agent has child support payments to that other agent. And then your agent becomes red-pilled and it just starts watching very bad videos on YouTube. And you're like, man, this is going off the rails quickly. But, you know you've done it right when you have that kind of setup and you have that kind of autonomy. Well, that's step one. Step two is give them wallets. And then once they have wallets, then they can actually become, they have economic agency, and then you can go and test out trading strategies and do cool and interesting things. And what's nifty about the passport concept is it's multi-chain. So if the agent has a passport, they can interact with all of the supported chains, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana, not just Midnight Native. So they truly have a God's eye view of the industry as a whole, and you can have them make increasingly sophisticated strategies and do increasingly sophisticated things. The other thing is the agent acts as a guardian in that it really helps you reason about, is that a real address that I'm sending it to, or has that been spoofed? Because we sometimes, looking at the letters, think a 0 is an O or something like that, or people misspell the domain name and you think it's right. Agents never make that mistake, ever, because they perceive the world differently. Same for counterfeit dApps. Is that really the right dApp, or is that a counterfeit dApp, or something like that? So having a co-pilot to help you navigate, it's a safety net, and it makes you feel a little bit more comfortable, and it helps chip away at that consumer issue of, I don't feel safe using crypto. It's a fundamental concern. So that only works, though, if you can trust the agent. So you have to have an understanding that your relationship with the agent is private. And nobody can go and violate that. And that's the principal problem right now when you look at OpenAI and Anthropic and Google. While they may mean well, they have all your data. And every single interaction you've ever had from the beginning of time with these things, they not only know, they can share with anybody they want at their discretion. And as these things become increasingly personal, like, hey, what's this rash or something like that? Google knows now. They see that stuff. There was an emerging trend that was actually floating around Twitter where people were, doing palm readings with the stuff, and people take a picture of their palm and put it on ChatGPT, and then there's a follow-up prompt saying, hey, can you show me the palm print? And it's a perfect palm print of a person. So you've just handed over your forensics to ChatGPT to read your palm. And kids do this, like an 11-year-old, hey, read your palm, and they'll do that. Now the 11-year-old's thing is there without parental consent. So it's a dystopian thing if you really fall the bouncy ball. So you say, well, it'd be nice to have the agent live in the can't be evil category, where when I give it data, I get a strong guarantee it can't share it with a third party, and it's handled in a particular way. So when you combine a passporting system with an agent system, you get a trusted agent that can't violate.
You control the scope of influence that you can give this agent and give them boundaries, etc. A little bit off topic, but how do you use agents right now? Are you using it on your own machine, or do you have a separate machine that you set up that doesn't give it access to all your emails and such?
Yeah, I have access to a lot of different techniques. And so I have some local hardware, some of the NVIDIA Sparks, and I stack them. And you can run with OpenClaw, a lot of great agentic backends like Gemma 431B is quite good. And I'm also a big fan of Qwen. And the new DeepSeek V4, I can't wait to install and look at. So local agentic intelligence is awesome. And it tends to be great for general purpose tasks and reasoning tasks. Coding, unfortunately, the closed source models are just so far ahead of the open source right now. So, it's hard to beat GPT-5.5 and Opus 4.7 when you look at these things. And so most of the coding that I do through those models. Most of the reasoning that I do through open source models that are local. But you really have to segregate these types of things and say, okay, what's personal and private? What's professional?
Correct.
If I'm doing open source code, I don't really care too much if I'm working on that code and it's going into a public repo. If ChatGPT sees it, it's guess what? It's open source. If it's proprietary stuff, you have to draw a firewall. The challenge for enterprises and users alike is it's hard to draw those lines. And so you need some form of a passporting system that helps you label stuff and control things. And so that's the other side of passports that's pretty exciting is how do you go from retail to enterprise? Because right now the focus is how do we get it on your phone and make it ridiculously easy to create? Step 2 is how do you link a collection of these things together and a collection of trusted execution environments together through MPC and other techniques? Once you do that, then you can have this idea of enterprise wallets. And what's so cool about it is we think we're going to take over the whole DAO space. And we're going to take over the whole enterprise space for this, for crypto payments. Because, you think about DAOs, you join a DAO, your entire payroll is public. Your entire network set is public. So Santiago's like, why are you paying Fede like twice as much as me? We both live in Buenos Aires. What's going on here, man? It's like, I thought we were cool. Can't really say you're not because the blockchain record's there. So a lot of people that are running these things with all this capital are starting to realize, well, if we're going to be a real business, we have a private side and a public side. How do you easily sort all of that out? If you have a passporting system, it's very easy for you to add people, remove people, and then you get to that multi-sig play. And it's very easy to do payroll. It's very easy to do HR stuff and these other things, and access control as well. Do I have an authority to use this system? And under what circumstances do I have it? So selective disclosure works this way. And it can be for crypto. It can be for non-crypto. I'll tell you something that's bothered me more than anything else. I had a friend who worked at Los Alamos, and he built nuclear weapons. And so he's just like really high up in the clearance chain, Q clearance, Sigma 18, and this type of stuff. So the United States government trusts this person with literally the nuclear arsenal. Then he goes to the airport, and they like strip search him with TSA and say, I don't know. Can we really trust this guy? I have to get on this plane. It's like, literally, I built nukes for you guys. And yet you're going to give me a hard time at the airport. Why? Because these are disconnected trust systems.
Right.
So while he's the most trusted person in the United States, the Q clearance is one of the hardest to get. On the other hand, he's not a trusted traveler here. Well, if you have a zero knowledge system, what the passporting system can do is provide a proof you're trusted.
Yeah.
It doesn't say why. So you can go to that airport and tap it, provide a proof, say this is a very trusted traveler. Maybe he's a senator, maybe he has a security clearance, maybe he's a firefighter in the community and he's an outstanding person. We don't know. We just know he's trusted.
Right.
And that's what the power of minimum viable disclosure really does. And so passporting helps you with that, helps you with contractors. It helps you with the elastic global economy where people come and go. And the problem is right now our trust model is oversharing.
Right.
And agents are a natural extension of that. We overshare to make them useful. We overshare to third parties to get them to a point where they feel comfortable to do business with us. But in the process of oversharing, we have no control over what we've shared.
Right.
And now we're starting to get buyer's remorse with that.
Correct.
They're starting to use that against us in many different ways.
Correct.
Maybe you overshare about some genetic information, then suddenly your health insurance goes up. Like, how did my insurance company discover I was predisposed for this particular risk? That doesn't make any sense. Right. Well, they bought your genomic data through a third-party broker, and they were able to link it to you and figure out that you're an at-risk thing, so your rates are up 30% for no fault of your own.
Right.
Because you have a higher chance of breast cancer or prostate cancer or something like that. That's not what I signed up for.
No.
In society.
I agree. We have a few minutes for some closing remarks. Ben?
So I'm here for the innovation. I'm here to bring folks in to Web3, make the experience as simple as it can be on your phone, and enable you to actually take advantage of the efficiency machine that we've built over the last 15 years. I'm also here to expand what I'd call the 3x5 card. It used to be the case at this particular conference back when it was held in New York, there were a universe of applications that we talked about what you could do with Web3. Over time, that kind of shrunk down to maybe the 3x5 card just said DeFi on it. But with the tokenomics that we have, the ability to have passports and agents, that's going to start to expand out, and you're going to start to see a revival of these types of applications that we used to talk about a lot,
right,
actually be embodied in the Web3 system with lower levels of trust, higher levels of security, and privacy ingrained by using these types of products.
That's great. Charles?
Well, first, Ben has one of the most important jobs at the Foundation. It's not easy to be him because you have to translate a desire into a reality. And you say, you have all these people come in and say, well, I heard from my CEO that we need privacy. So can you give me some privacy? So, oh, sure, I'm just going to go to the privacy closet, shuffle some privacy into a bag, and you can take it on home. Oh my God, it's such a complicated question. And so the first question you ask is like, what do you mean by that? What exactly do you mean by privacy? But it's been fun, and I think the commercial interest has been extraordinary. There's so many people that have come, and this booth is just packed every day because everybody realizes that this is a problem that needs a solution. What they don't understand is that it's a bigger problem than just implementing a framework. It's not a light switch. It's like waterproofing it. There's a lot of things you have to do to keep the water out. And so what Midnight seeks to be is that companion that kind of travels along. And as we evolve, you evolve. And what we want to do is help people have the tools that they need to reason about what their privacy story is for themselves and their users.
Right.
And the other side of it is the economic reality of it. The reason we don't have privacy is people are told, well, you need all the data to make money from it.
Right.
So, I'm in medicine as well. And one of the things I get very excited about is how do we make money from medical records, preserve the private information of the underlying patient? Because it shouldn't cost $100 million to do a clinical trial. It should cost $10 million to find people suitable for a clinical trial. That we all have an incentive to cure diseases and solve problems, right? So if we can create economic agency for the data, I'll create sharing economies for that, but still preserve people's human rights at the same time, that's a very powerful play. So then more enterprises say, hey, actually, we like this model because it's a liability holding the data. Well, we can extract value. If we get hacked and we lose all of that, that's catastrophic for our brand. So it's a hard job to get all these people to understand it's more nuanced. But what's been cool is we've only been in market for a few months now. We launched Token in December, and Guarded Mainnet came out in March. And what we've been able to do in just such a short period of time is we're starting to build a movement. And every single thing, when we talk about these things, these aren't hypotheticals. Midnight Passport's going to be beta tested with hundreds of Night Force ambassadors very soon. Midnight City's already being beta tested, and we're just about to roll about 1,000 people in for these agents. And so these are things that we have a deep bench to draw from of partners and users to test at scale, and it allows us to get to a point where we know it works.
Right.
We know it's simple.
Yeah. What I do appreciate about what we're doing is that it is product focused, which is user focused. We're not starting from the tech and solving the problem. We're actually going into what are the pain points, what are the things that are causing anxieties, and how do we resolve them? And to be honest, it's been a dream to work on something that will outlive me. And I believe this is something that will outlive me. And I'm very, very excited for all the things that we're going to do. I appreciate your time. We're at Q. Thank you so much. And we'll talk later.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.